Welcome to episode 37 of the Everyday Sens podcast. I'm Jack Richardson, joined by Brennan Parks. Brennan, we've got a big signing to talk about. Obviously, it happened a couple days ago, or less than 48 hours ago, I guess, on Wednesday night. The Ottawa Senators extended Jake Sanderson to an 8 by $8.05 million extension. So that's $64.4 million, the big one. Obviously, it'll begin next season. He's still got 1 year left on his entry-level deal. So it was late at night. We weren't going to, on the East Coast, it was still even late for you over in Alberta, but let's just get right into it. So immediately, what were your thoughts? This is going to be a Jake Sanderson dedicated episode. I know we've dedicated segments to him before. We've talked about the contract especially, but immediate thoughts for you just when the news broke, because to me personally, I was surprised. But I'll get into that in a little bit.
Yeah, I was honestly pretty surprised too, because I didn't as much as I wanted them to offer him a contract, I didn't think it would actually happen. We talked about him a few episodes ago, actually, which was nice timing. I know we both kind of agreed, yeah, I'd send over an 8x8 offer today. That's what we said, right? And they end up signing him for just basically that. I was surprised though, because we also said in that episode that Sanderson, it'd probably be in his best interest to wait and sign a mega deal next year. He came out after and basically said that watching Tim and Brady commit to the team and everybody else kind of just pushed him in that direction too, which is what we said when those guys signed, right? Is it's going to push everybody else to kind of follow that track as well. So my immediate thoughts on the actual contract are that it's a total win for Ottawa. I know we can get into the whole mess of what Twitter became after this happened, because for Sens fans, obviously, I think we're all very content. I didn't see a lot of Sens fans that were worried about this, but my God, you can really tell how underrated Jake Sanderson is when you look around the league and the league reaction, right? And it was the same for Tim when he signed last year. Everybody's like, oh, he hasn't even played 82 games yet. This is crazy. But I don't think people realize that at this point in the modern game, you bet on potential. That's what you do. You don't just wait. If they sign Sanderson to a 4-year deal, for example, and then have to re-sign him while he's in the middle of his prime and then into his late 30s or something along those lines, that's much worse than the situation you're in right now, where you're getting his best years, right? So I said it before, and I'm going to stick to this. I think that if they waited till next summer to sign him, because again, just so everyone's aware, this doesn't kick in until next year. He's still on his ELC this year, so he's actually signed for the next 9 years, which is kind of crazy. But if they waited until next summer, I am a firm believer that he would have made 9 million plus, and I'm saying pushing 10 million, because I think he's going to come out this year and he's going to become Ottawa's number one defenseman. And similar to Tim, I just think that at this time next year, everyone around the league is going to look at this deal and say, yeah, that was a good deal. That was really smart of Pierre Dorion, right? And then he's going to get his deserved recognition. So, what were your first thoughts here and your immediate impression on this?
Yeah, so again, I was surprised, but the thing that surprised me, like you mentioned, was just why Sanderson would do it. And he talked about it in his media. He said, obviously, and Ian Mendez had a piece come out today just about, he talked to Jeff Sanderson, Jake's dad, and he obviously played in the NHL as well. And other than Keith Tkachuk, I'd say he's the most well-known NHL dad that the Sens have. They've got a lot of, kids that grew up around the NHL. So he obviously knows he's got a lot of experience. And I think his advice to Jake was, term is good. And I think the Sens knew that. It's not easy as a young player to wave 8 years in your face with that amount of money and be like, no, especially when everyone else around him does it, which again, he mentioned as well. But, I think it's awesome. And obviously most Sens fans, I'd say 95% of Sens fans were through the moon or up to the moon or through the roof, whatever it is, with this contract. Other fan bases weren't, and it's because they haven't watched him play, which is fine. I understand, though. I will say I understand 77 career games. It's probably a record-setting deal in that sense, right? He's got 4 career goals. He's not blowing the socks off, but anyone who watches this kid play, any analyst who's seen him play, had good things to say about the deal. It was all about a bet on potential. The analytics accounts that I follow loved the deal as well. It just seems like a home run in terms of betting on potential. And the thing I don't understand that, the bet on potential thing, and I don't understand people who don't get that, is because you look at Rasmus Dahlin, and I went back and forth with I'm not sure if they were a Sabres fan, but went back and forth with a person on Twitter 2 nights ago, I guess, about Dahlin and how that situation is exactly where the Sens were going to be heading if they gave Sanderson a 3-year deal next summer or something like that. So Dahlin now has 1 year left on his deal. And again, I'm not comparing Rasmus Dahlin today to Jake Sanderson today, But being 3 years older than Sanderson, in 3 years, it's fair to assume Sanderson will get to that level. He's a top end defenseman. That's what they do. So where Dahlin is now, yeah, he's probably going to get 10 and a half, I think is the rumor, maybe pushing 11 on an 8-year deal with the Sabres. And it's not that he's not worth that, because he is, but by the time Sanderson gets to that age, let's say he does meet that potential, he'll be smack in the middle of an 8-year deal and he's not getting a raise. So it's the bet on potential. And a lot of other people made good points too, is as the cap goes up in 2-3 years, 8 million is going to be the new 6 million. So it's not, and that might be a little like here and there, whatever. Maybe it's the next 6.5, whatever it is, but it's not what it used to be. Like when Shabbat, even 3 or 4 years ago, when he signed his extension in September of 2019, I want to say, for 8 million, that was a lot more back then, even with the cap staying the same. So nothing about this to me is a red flag. I think the thing that other fan bases are wary of, and it's fair, is the amount of big deals the Sens have. And it's not on Toronto's level. It's definitely not. They don't have anyone making over 9. They just have a lot of players making a lot of money. Like they've got 5 players making $8 million if you count Josh Norris at 7.95. Like that's not nothing. So with that, I'll kick to you. Is there any concern now? And not that there's a cap issue, because we know that. We'll get into that as well for next season. But is there any just concern, because we saw injury history like last year with Josh Norris? He didn't even play on an $8 million term. Like, is there any concern for you with that amount of term being and money, I guess, being locked in when they haven't really proven anything in the playoffs? And I'm not saying that's where I stand. I'm just, is there a concern there for you with that?
There's not, for me, honestly. I mean, I have concern over like Josh Norris just because you could see what happened when they lost him last year and how shallow they got on depth. But like we can compare to Toronto, and for me, I mean, I love what Ottawa's doing compared to Toronto. I love having the core group signed for, long term, all of them. Like I had a tweet that like showed every single one of them, and it's just so nice to look at. And frankly, as a Sens fan, I don't really care. I'm not going to complain just because we've seen so many star players come and go at the hands of not spending money on them, basically, and not willing to commit to them, and that sucks. There's literally no worse feeling than, I look on my wall and I've got all of the jerseys of my favorite players growing up and all of them left on bad terms. Like that's the worst sour feeling as a fan. So I'm not going to complain about this. I love the players all committing to the team and vice versa, the team committing to the players, because that's just not what we saw in the past. Cap wise, I'm really not concerned either, because like you said, there's nobody over 9 million. I know they have a lot of contracts, but like if you're going to keep good players, you're going to have to pay good players. That's just how it works. And I'm under the impression personally that if you're keeping, like, they've got, a good group of forwards, like 4 forwards that are all kind of the core members, like Timmy, Brady, Batherson, and Norris. And then they've got on defense, Shabbat and Sanderson locked up here for Shabbat still another 5 years, I think. And then Chikrin's got 2 years, and they could potentially sign Chikrin as well. I know people I saw some tweets too that were like, okay, well now Chikrin's gone, or they're going to trade Shabbat. They can't keep all 3. This was like the whole DeBrincat thing too, where you can't keep these players if this player signs. Nobody's actually doing the math here, just so we're aware. We're all just kind of assuming and freaking out and making issues that aren't issues. So I haven't done the math either yet, but I'm almost certain that when the cap goes up, if it goes up as expected, because it's expected to jump by like 10 million in the next few years, it's going to really go up fast. And if that does happen, then I'm very comfortable with the fact they could probably get Chikrin. Now, if Chikrin breaks out to be a Norris candidate next year, maybe he's out of their price range. I don't know. But if you can get him for like around this money too, or under, less, like I'm pretty confident they can get it done. So I'm not too worried about that. The cap thing though, yeah, that is really important. That's kind of the big thing in my mind, is that, again, doesn't kick in till next year. Like even next year, people are going to be looking at 8 million a little bit differently. And then, the year after, and in the middle of Sanderson's contract, 5 years from now, like people are going to look at 8 million, and that's going to be the going rate for a, like a top pairing defenseman. But I mean, it's going to be even higher. Like players are going to start signing for more. I also think that Sanderson, he's 21 years old now. I think he's kind of setting the bar, the new bar for young players. Like Owen Power, I want to see his deal now, because I'd be very interested if he signs for more than this now. That would be something. I think that he really is setting the bar. It's kind of nice that he signed before Power now too, because if Power signed for like more than this, and then it became a big thing for Sanderson. So yeah, I'm happy they got this done. And like, it's just, I was surprised. It was very late at night too. It got announced, and I looked at my phone and I was kind of just like, whoa, like what's happening here? I mean, we haven't had Sens news in ages. So I know they did the season ticket like tour yesterday as well for season ticket holders in the CTC. adding a whole bunch of new stuff. Michael Andlauer was there and spoke. There were a few videos of that. So that was really awesome. And frankly, I mean, the new owner comes in, and I guess he hasn't officially taken over yet, so we don't have to credit him for this, but I'm almost certain the team is not dishing out 8.05 million, like $64 million, unless they've got Michael Andlauer's approval. So I think it's a pretty good start for Andlauer here to hire an analytics department member and then pay 64 million to Jake Sanderson and get like all of the Sens fans on board. And then he goes and he has a personal talk with like all of the season ticket holders, and it's just amazing to see. So this is just something that we as Sens fans haven't seen really ever, just because, the past ownership, they had their faults, they had their benefits, but to see Andlauer really connecting and not just connecting with the fans, but actually like backing his talk with money already, before he's even officially taken over, it's honestly like the best thing that I could have hoped for. And it's awesome to see.
Yeah, so my guess is that they were maybe hoping to announce it like they did with Stützle last year, because obviously it was a day before to the year that Stützle had signed his, and it was at the same event where they announced it. So my guess is they wanted to do that, and maybe it was going to leak, so they just got in front of it. That's my bet. Because yeah, they had a similar like tour of the CTC and everything. Got to see some of the players. Sanderson spoke and everything like that, and obviously Andlauer came out and met some season ticket holders. So it's all great, and I like. We'll go back to Owen Power too. That's interesting because he's a defenseman who by many is regarded as better than Sanderson right now. So I'd imagine if you're Power's agent, you'd be pushing for more money than that. And I like that as a divisional competitor. That they're going to have to shore up some more money, because a lot of the Sabres fans, there's a lot of comparables obviously with Buffalo and Ottawa. We've done all these, but the interesting thing is that the Sabres have way more cap space right now. But they've got to sign Dahlin, and then they have to sign Owen Power still. They've got Cousins and Thompson on great deals though. Like they're still like I think a year or two behind where Ottawa was. Not saying team wise, but just contract wise. So that's really interesting. Just to we'll watch that for sure. I would bet you that Power just plays out this season, and maybe that's just the way the Sabres want it. But anyway, we'll skip to some other defensemen though. Like I also mentioned, Charlie McAvoy, and I think Adam Fox waited. Maybe he got it right of his deal. I think Fox and Makar are maybe a bit different, but like Quinn Hughes and McAvoy, I'm thinking Zach Werenski, excuse me. Like all those guys are now making nine figures, like 9 million, like 9.5. Darnell Nurse is another one, right? Where they signed a bridge out of their entry level and then got what they were worth after that bridge deal, which is what the bridge deal is for. You're trying to see if a player can hold up to those expectations. But with Sanderson, like we said, that bridge for him would take us to 2027, I guess, by the time it was over. By that time, he's going to be 25 years old in the middle of his prime. You're paying a arm and a leg to keep that guy around, right? So then you get into the whole Matthew Tkachuk scenario. It's different with forwards, obviously. You get the DeBrincat scenario. Like the Sens had every reason to avoid a bridge deal altogether. Sanderson, though, did not. And I know it's you see all that term and money being flashed in front of you as a young guy. I think the first thing I've loved what Stützle said last year. He's like, my parents don't have to work anymore. And I think one of the first things Sanderson said here was that he's going to get himself a phone plan, like his own phone plan, which is funny. So just little things like it's nice hearing them talk about that, because I think money with athletes is pretty taboo in the sense that you can't really ask them about it. And I know Ian tweeted out that Sanderson said on his own volition, or he put in his article, he brought it up unprompted, that it's life-changing money. That was the quote. And it is. And I like hearing him say that because it is. So I kind of want to get into other fan bases just not respecting Sanderson, I guess. And I don't know, man. Like, I don't understand it because listen, like, yeah, if someone else on another team played 77 games and then got an 8.8, 8x8 extension, like if Matty Beniers signed this, I wouldn't even blink an eye, because obviously he won the Rookie of the Year and everything like that. But I don't understand why it's so hard to understand. Like if you see a fan base reacting this way, you should know it's a good signing. Like usually every fan base is tapped into their team. They know when contracts are good. They know when they're bad. No one was reacting poorly to this. Absolutely no one. So if you're another fan base, yeah, you can have your opinion. You'd be like, oh, I want Morgan Rielly over Jake Sanderson, which is like bananas, by the way. So what were your, I know you had some, obviously you've got some takes, but what were your thoughts on other fan bases just kind of poking their head in and being like, hey, that's a bad contract?
Well, I'll start by saying I can, like you said, I can understand, you look at maybe a guy who hasn't played a lot and you see this contract. And again, the perception right now in today's game is that this is a massive deal. A few years from now, it's going to be different. So you have to keep that in mind. But like for me, I think it's just that people haven't watched Jake Sanderson. And I had a lot of people in my replies that were talking about it and stuff. And I could just tell, like, you're speaking about this, but you haven't actually seen the guy play. Like, I think if you look under Elliot Friedman's initial tweet, where he announced this, you can see all of the crazy replies and stuff. And I guarantee 90% of those people talking are just looking up Jake Sanderson's stat line and then making this claim and are like they're basing their entire take off of this. And that's a very common thing for Twitter takes, is that people don't actually watch things or assess or analyze things. They just look up a stat line, goals, assists, points, plus, minus, and then they say, okay, like now my entire take is formed. I know exactly who this player is and exactly how they perform and why they're not worth this contract. But if you actually go back and you watch this, and if you dive into his analytics a bit, and then you factor in that he was playing with Travis Hamonic, who's probably a seventh defenseman, like it's just, I don't know. For me, it's hard because he hasn't played a lot, and I get that. But at the same time, to say that he's not worth this or that he won't be worth this, because maybe he's not worth this based on last year alone. Maybe I would have paid him like 5 or 6 million for last year, but like at the same time, again, we're talking about potential here, and in today's game, you have to sign for potential. You have to take bets. That's how you build teams who aren't cap strapped, is that you take bets on guys like this. And I mean, if Jake Sanderson becomes a bust, then credit to everybody. But like based on his rookie season, based on the fact that he was a fifth overall pick, who was dominant in college, dominant at the US program, dominant in the NHL in his first year, like why would he trail off and become a terrible defenseman? Like he's gonna be, heck, even if he's not a number one defenseman, like a proven number one, and he's just part of that three-headed monster in Ottawa with Shabbat and Chikrin, like even if Sanderson is a premium guy on their second pairing, like I'm fine paying him this. He's still going to be a part of the core. You're still going to have, like, he is a penalty killer. He's a power play guy. He can do literally everything. I wrote just a quick article of my reactionary piece on it, and my main take was that he's so versatile. Like you could see Ottawa using him in so many different ways last year. Like he literally he led them in average penalty killing minutes at 316, more than anybody else in the team. And like that was a point of specialty for him. But then he also took up a role in the power play as the year went on, and he looked really good on there. People wanted him to take Shabbat's spot on the first unit, like the way he would walk the line, his skating. Like it's just, for me, I think people are overreacting, and I'm very compare this to Tim, just because Tim signed 8 by 8.35 last year. He was coming off, and he had, I think, what was his stat line? He was well under a point per game, and people were like kind of freaking out. He wasn't even
He had 58 points last year
yeah,
in however many games he played.
and he
Yeah.
wasn't even a proven center yet or anything, so people were kind of freaking out about it. But like Ottawa knew what they had. They watched this guy play. They analyzed like the underlying numbers and the way that Tim contributed and his situation, the fact that he played with Chris Tierney half the time. Like it's just, you have to consider these things, and other fan bases don't see that, right? They don't see Sanderson's defensive impact. That's the thing with defensemen specifically, aside from Tim, is that like Sanderson really shines defensively. I thought he looked a lot more confident and strong offensively as the year went on, but defense is his whole game. Like that's always been what he is really good at. Um, and it's hard to measure that. Like it's hard to measure that if you don't watch him. You can't really look up his defensive stats aside from a few metrics, but even those can be kind of spotty and hit and miss. It's just hard to measure that. So I can kind of understand, I mean, I can understand why they're looking at him if they haven't watched him and they think this is crazy. I can't understand why they feel the need to voice that and put it into the world that they think it's crazy, because they don't actually have any basis. Like they're just kind of saying something. Like if you're saying that this is a crazy deal that should have never been signed, you're kind of just saying that you haven't watched him and you don't know what you're talking about. That's my opinion on it. So yeah, what are your takes on some of these other fan bases? Because I will say it's a bit of a wormhole when you start reading Twitter replies to like to Elliot Friedman's tweets and stuff. It's just so frustrating, I find, because you're like so excited, and then it puts this damper on you, even though you shouldn't care about other fan bases' opinions.
Yeah, I think personally I'm getting better at just not caring. Like it's because then you go on a Leafs post or a Habs post, and there's a bunch of Sens fans doing the same thing. So like that's sports, but it's fun. But I mean, yeah, you said it perfectly. Like people who are saying that, you can tell who's writing stuff and hasn't actually watched him play. I think I want to say Jack Han, maybe he's the used to be a coach, I think, and he still coaches probably, but I actually really like his page. I do. He had this weird cryptic tweet though last night saying, if Jason Robertson's a perfect example of a bad skater, making the best of it or something. I'm misquoting it, but on
It's
purpose. I'm not
so
reading it word for
random.
word.
It's so
And then
weird.
then Jake Sanderson's a good example of a great skater putting himself in bad positions. And I was like, hold on. And a lot of other Sens fans were like, hold on, back that up. And he did today. Not well, in my opinion. He kind of just showed examples of how his gap control needs to get better. But again, this is a 20-year-old rookie. So anyway, enough with that. So like that was the only time where I was looking. I'm like, okay, maybe this guy's got something to say. Like he's not necessarily saying he's a bad defenseman, just he's got to improve in places. That's fine. Of course he does. Everyone does. Like Tim still has to. Connor McDavid has to improve in areas. Everyone has to improve. Um, Speaking of Connor McDavid, though, the moment I knew Jake Sanderson was special, or that really locked it in for me, is actually the game Anton Forsberg got hurt. The Sens got blown out 6-3. I think McDavid had like 5 points. It was not a good night for the Sens, but I just remember being glued to Jake Sanderson. I think he scored in that game. He did actually. He scored in that game on a nice jump in the play, great shot up the slot. The way that guy competed against Connor McDavid, and it goes back to what I said a couple episodes ago about that World Juniors where he wasn't the top defenseman coming in. They go up against a stacked Canadian team and he leads the US in ice time and they win 2-0. They didn't give up a goal. And he was a big reason why. He played the most out of any player on the ice. That's the kind of stuff. And that's what I was talking about when I say Jake Sanderson's going to be the Conn Smythe winner for the Sens if eventually they win the Stanley Cup. He's that guy. He's him. So watching him compete against literally the best player any of us have ever watched was special to me. And I think that obviously the organization sees him every single day. The coaching staff was raving about him. I like going back to last summer too, because obviously Sanderson was in the fold two springs ago. Like he signed his entry level deal, I think March 2022, after North Dakota's season was over, but he was hurt. So he didn't play, and his rookie year was last year, obviously. But obviously the team is around him. They see the way he skates and practices, get to know him a bit more. So going into that summer, I remember we keep talking about how last summer the big question was, can Jake Sanderson step into a top four role? Is it too early? There was talk of even starting him in the AHL, I know. And I think the team, like DJ and Pierre, I'll give them credit, and Dorion's credit's coming. We'll talk about that in a bit. But DJ and Pierre, to give them credit, were very, very coy about how excited they were for this kid because you don't want to put pressure on him. But I think later in the year, though, Sanderson says he thrives under pressure. Like he is, and the quote he dropped, I've got it pulled up, or I will have it pulled up here today or at the media thing yesterday. Sorry. I believe he said, word for word, you see the chemistry in the locker room. It's something that will be here for a while. We're going to win within the next couple of years. We know that, and I want to be here for it. The main thing is why you play hockey is to win the Stanley Cup. So you know that group in there, we're ready for it. Like this kid, he just gets it. He has a competitive drive, and to me, even if it was over Zoom in 2020 on the draft interviews, I think the Sens could see that when it was him or Drysdale in that 5 slot if they were going with a defenseman. They just saw that competitive edge that you can't teach, and you can pretty much just contain it as a coach or a GM. You can't teach a kid or tell a kid to have more drive. Like they're born with it, and I think that's special. And it's how the great players evolve. So I'm not putting Jake Sanderson on this greatest of all time pedestal, but that's the standard that I think he's setting. And I love that it's Stützle, Tkachuk, Sanderson, the top 3 paid players on this team, because they're going to set the standard, and nobody is going to get paid more than any of those guys for the next five years that Tkachuk has left on his deal. No one.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's a great point about the competitive drive. That's kind of the difference between drafted players who bust and drafted players who make it too, is like if we look at a Logan Brown, for example, he had all the talent in the world. And of course, health was a bit of a concern, but the problem with him seemed to be drive. Like he just didn't have the natural given drive or competitiveness that kind of pushed him to the next level, where he was willing to do the things to win, like whatever it took, right? You're willing to sacrifice yourself. You're willing to forego getting points to win. That's kind of like the competitive drive that a lot of guys just don't have, and Sanderson does. And Ottawa's been very good at finding these players, because Brady's got it too. Of course, we'll really see who's got it in the playoffs. Like that'll be the who's got that it factor. But I think you look at Ottawa's core, and that's what I find separates them from a team like Toronto, is it just seems like they have a lot of guys who have the it factor, the drive. And it seems like there's that funny meme where Pierre Dorion in a video a while ago with like the caption that says, "Is he a high character guy?" And that's like the big meme for Dorion. But it's kind of like proven effective actually, because it seems like they've really found good character people who have the it factor on the ice as well, and that's not easy to find. So I don't know what their interview process is like, but it's worked for them, and they've got a nice core here. Um, but yeah, did you want to get into a little bit of Pierre Dorion, because he's giddy as well, right? Like you can see him in the videos. The Sentence posted the little breakaway video again with Sanderson and signing and stuff, and Pierre Dorion, you can always see so giddy, and he's just so happy. And it will be interesting to see what happens with him, right? Because for as much as like we've criticized Pierre, he's built this core too, so it's kind of like he almost does deserve to see it through now and see what happens. But at the same time, like if the team doesn't win this year, it's going to be really complicated, because now you've got these big dogs buying in, and they're like, all of them have dropped these quotes about how they've bought in and they've pushed each other and they all want to win and they know they're going to win. And it's a matter of time. But at the same time, as fans, like people are not just going to keep sitting around and waiting in year 7, 8, 9 of the rebuild for the team to make the playoffs, right? So Michael Andlauer is going to have his work cut out for him if the team doesn't do well this year. But I think Sanderson signing too, like I looked on social media and there were almost the entire team posted something like congratulating him, and it's just such a tight knit group, you can tell. And I think that's going to pay dividends too. But this year, honestly, man, like I have high expectations. But this was another thing too that Dorion did, is that the Sens have 2 first-round picks as well, so it's going to be interesting in that sense too, because for as much as the rebuild is over now, and I feel that way, and I think that there does have to be a level of compete. The Sens can't finish like 25th overall this year. That's just not something that can happen. But they do have 2 first-round picks, so like even if they don't make the playoffs and they just miss again, they're entering the draft with 2 probably high picks, because they're going to have another Detroit or Boston, which will probably be a reasonable pick too. So they're going to be in a great spot to kind of do that. Also, trade bait right at the deadline. They could try and make a move. I mean, there's so many different options now, and Pierre kind of made that happen as well. So I think there's some Pierre's got his ups and downs, but he's kind of a point of interest in these contracts he's signed. Make me feel a lot better about him, just because I know he's signed some bad ones too, of course. But like again, look at the core, and they got all these guys. The biggest contract is 8 by 8.35 million, and look at the players they've got. Like a lot of teams would have signed those guys for more. Pierre managed to make this work. He managed to kind of find those high character guys who are willing to buy into the team and kind of buy into each other too. Because Sanderson, he did talk about that, how like I said earlier, you saw Tim and Brady and Norris and these guys all commit to the team, and he was like, I'm going to do that too. Like, why wouldn't I do that? And of course, like again, he's a young guy. It's hard to turn down that contract offer. But I mean, I'm sure his agent kind of told him, like, if you want to bet on yourself a little bit more and wait another year, there's nothing wrong with that. And you'll probably get paid more money next year, because not only will you probably have another really good season, but the cap is going to rise. Like the money is going to be worth more every year, right? So the longer you wait, or if you sign a bridge deal, you tell them you're only going to take a bridge deal, you're probably going to get paid a lot more 4 or 5 years from now. Almost definitely will, than you are right now. So I think buying in is a huge thing. And it just shows that these guys, they care about a little bit more than money, which is something that other teams don't have. And those teams who just can't get over the hump, I feel like that's what they don't have, is they don't have guys who are willing to sacrifice a little bit for the team. Ottawa does. And Pierre Dorion, credit to him. I'm going to give him credit for this one and for the contracts, because he's done a really good job signing contracts for sure.
I will too. And look, I'll go back even further. I'll go to the trade deadline. You look at the Chychrun trade, and yeah, they ended up giving up a 12th overall pick, but that 12th overall pick wouldn't have played for the Sens in probably 3 years tops. We talked about it a lot, but that's a great trade based on what the market was for Chychrun originally. Like he waited and waited and got a huge piece that is now putting them in a different stratosphere, right? That blue line is formidable now because of Jacob Chychrun, right? Sanderson and Chabot were always there. Chychrun is, and I got to stop saying X factor, but he is for the depth of that blue line. And, then he has to move to Brinkett because of DeBrincat not wanting to be here, but I think a mix of also he wasn't going to get paid $9 here. He wasn't going to get the bag, and that goes back to what we said. And it's not against DeBrincat. I have no ill will against him. I'm still going to boo him if I'm at that game, but I don't blame him. He wanted to go home. Like that's fine. But he made that move and got I think our main reaction was good, not great at the time of the trade, and it was. I keep going back to Ian too. I remember at the time he said with the DeBrincat trade this summer that it's like a ground rule double, and then you want to see what the next at bat is. The next at bat was signing Vladimir Tarasenko to a 1-year, $5 million deal. Like, that's a great pivot because at worst, Tarasenko is going to replace what DeBrincat did last year with 27 goals. Probably not as many points, but the goal scoring probably. Then you add Kubalik to that equation. Like, that's another good piece for the third line. Like, he supplemented the lineup well, given what he was able to do. Like, you weren't going to keep DeBrincat, and even if you did, you weren't going to be able to supplement the third line well enough. So the fact that he was able to do that, and then on top of that, lock up Jake Sanderson, your stud player, a guy who I think can be the best player on this team, to an 8x8 essentially deal. I think it's a great summer for Pierre Dorion. The funny thing is too, though, going back to last year, the summer of Pierre, I've got that shirt and everything, which was a fun little movement to jump on. But like last summer, it was, yeah, he made the DeBrincat trade, which was a huge swing. It kind of signaled to fans like, we're back, we're trying again, which at the time, again, was still a great trade. And then he signs Giroux, gets Cam Talbot, like does a lot of kind of smaller things after that. But a lot of Pierre's summer last year was cleaning up his old mistakes. It was getting rid of Michael Del Zotto, buying out Colin White, trading Matt Murray, like those three things. And then it was kind of like this, oh my God, what a summer. But hindsight's 2020, but I think this summer is much better for Pierre Dorion in the grand scheme of things. And I don't know if it's really close. Like Giroux was probably going to come here anyway. I don't know if you can, I mean, maybe he wasn't though. Maybe the DeBrincat trade was important, but like the pivot Dorion made this year on DeBrincat, the signing of Tarasenko, the Korpisalo signing as well. Like he had a big summer, and I think obviously we still got to wrap it up here with Shane Pinto, but well, we got into that in the last episode. You can go check that out on the YouTube and on audio and stuff like that. But to me, I think he had a great summer as a general manager, to the point now where I'm going to be it's going to be bittersweet if Andlauer ends up switching people out. Like, and the other crazy thing is there's not really much work to be done anymore. Like, this is kind of it. If next summer, they're still chilling with cap space. Let's talk about that for a second. Since DeBrincat's gone, you could afford to pay Sanderson 8. I think I saw a mock cap friendly thing without Pinto under contract, Tarasenko gone, and I guess Kubalik too. Maybe that's already filled in with a prospect. I'm not sure. They had 12 million in space, and their D was slotted. Like Clevin took Brandstrom's spot. Like, that's fine. You can work with that. You can get a third line, second line left winger and a third or sign Pinto. Like with that's a ton of money to work with, and they don't have other stuff to worry about. Like, that's exciting to me, and that's because they were able to do this without, committing term and more money to Tarasenko and guys like Korpisalo. It's fine because it's high term, but it's low money. So I think he had a great summer, to be honest. And I don't know if it saves his job, quote unquote, but like it's hard to knock what he did this summer given the cards he was dealt. I think that's a good way to put it.
Yeah, it is, and like you said, I think with the cap next year too, they're getting a lot of the buyout contracts off the books too. There's a few of those coming off, so that'll free up some space as well. But yeah, like Pierre did have a really good summer, and he had an underrated summer because last summer was the one that everybody really praised. But I think he was put in a situation like you said with DeBrincat where it was a tough spot. He had to move him, and just make the best of it, kind of, because like, I don't know if he would have taken the money here. I don't know. We don't really know if it was a situation where he was always just going to leave or what it was. But by what he said in Detroit, it kind of sounds like he wanted to leave regardless because he came in that first conference and said, like, he didn't really have the chance to, like, get to know if he wanted to stay here or anything. Like, I don't know. He said some weird thing like that in his first conference where he was with Steve Yzerman. That was kind of bitter. But Pierre kind of had to make the best of a bad situation. And the trade itself, you can say what you want. I still think it was a fine trade. I don't think it was like a huge win for either side, but I think getting Kubalik and then getting a first round pick, and he just kind of made the best of it. But then he really made the best of it by signing Tarasenko. And we said, like, if you sign Tarasenko, you'll do this. And then he used that money, right? They got Korpisalo too, obviously, but Tarasenko was the big one that kind of comes in. And then now they really capitalized by committing all this money to Jake Sanderson. And that probably wouldn't have happened if DeBrincat was still here. And then next year, you're going and probably having to pay Sanderson more or bridge him because you don't have the available money or whatever it might be, right? So it sucks that they lost DeBrincat, obviously, from a forward perspective, but at the same time, they are now kind of allocating that money properly to other places. And that was what we said when it happened too with the DeBrincat thing was like, if they're going to trade him and they have to trade him, just like make the best of it by like allocating the money properly. That's what you have to do is go sign these players, go use that money, be a cap team, even though you're not paying DeBrincat the big bucks. You can go spend that money elsewhere and improve your roster. And they've now done that, right? They've now completed this roster and made it look really good. Next summer, like you said, they're going to have some flexibility with the cap. Again, they've got those 2 first-round picks. Maybe they know they've got that flexibility and they bring somebody in with that. Maybe they just draft players with those and then they sign somebody else. Maybe they re-sign Tarasenko if he was a good fit. There's a whole bunch of options they're going to have. So this is all on the back of Pierre Dorion making smart moves for the long-term outlook. So Andlauer, it's like you said, it'll be a little bittersweet if he does replace a bunch of people. If the team does well this year too, especially like if they come out and they lose in the first round or something, and Andlauer wants to bring his own people in regardless, it'll be a little bit bittersweet just because like I'd love to see Steve Staios here, but at the same time, if the team actually does do well this year, and then like Pierre's made all these good moves recently, and then they just go and replace him, it would be kind of unfortunate for him, obviously, and it would be a lot of unknowns too coming to Ottawa. So I'm pretty much good on that. Otherwise, I think we've kind of hit the bases here. But yeah, you can go ahead.
I got one more thing
for
though.
sure. Go for it.
So if this team ends up winning down the line, and Dorion's not the general manager, but it's the same nucleus, his fingerprints are going to be all over it, 100%. Like that's just the nature of sports.
He'll
like
find
he'll
more
be
jobs.
Yeah, and he'll be recognized if, let's say, the Sens win the cup in 2 years and he's not the GM. He'll be mentioned heavily, I believe, by us especially, because I'm assuming most of these players would be part of that. So you just go over the list this summer. He got a top 6 forward, got a top 9 forward, or 2 top 9 forwards if you want to call it. Got a starting goaltender, locked up their young stud to a very reasonable number and a long-term, as long as you can, term deal. And that's it. Like, I mean, yeah, they still got to sign Shane Pinto, but I don't think we did an off-season checklist episode, but we talked a lot in April and May and in June about what they needed to do this summer. And a lot of it revolved around DeBrincat. We had debates over whether to keep him, whether or not. I also forgot a thing on that list, a first-round pick. They got a first-round pick. They have 2 seconds, I believe, next year too, or maybe just 1, but 2 first-round picks. Like, they're set for the next little bit. And prospect pool doesn't look great in terms of top-end talent, but look at the roster. The roster is set for the next 5 years. So that's what's exciting. We can kind of leave it there. We didn't really get into some Chychrun stuff. I know you kind of mentioned it, but we'll get into that a little bit later, maybe even next year, because Sanderson's deal doesn't kick in yet. So that's going to be a really fun battle to watch. First thing I thought too, after that deal was signed, big year for Thomas Chabot. Huge year for Thomas Chabot. We'll save that for next episode. We'll see you again on Monday. Thank you for watching. That's episode 37 of the Everyday Sens podcast. Like, comment, and subscribe to the YouTube page. Subscribe to everydaysens.com too. I keep teasing it. I'm going to start writing eventually. Work's been really busy. So it's my first September without school, and it's still just absolutely hectic for me, which is great. So we will get some analysis going. Preseason is right around the corner, and yeah, we'll be right there. So thanks everyone for listening and for watching, and we'll see you on Monday.